Good evening to everybody. It's Dennis from Aspen Thicket Grouse Dogs. We're going live tonight. We are going to be talking about whatever you really want to talk about, but I designed tonight to be talking a little bit about puppies and springtime, spring fever. You know, everybody's kind of getting into that frame of mind where they want to start thinking about puppies and whatnot. And so we figure we'll talk about that a little bit tonight. So why don't you go ahead and grab yourself a beer and we will start thinking about springtime because we know it is right around the corner. It won't be long. We're going to be hearing it, right? So welcome. Go ahead and grab yourself something to drink. I am happen to grab myself a Point Special from Stevens Point, Wisconsin. Remember, if you're out of Point, you're out of town. I'm not sure a lot of people will remember that, but that was my alma mater where I went to school. So let's say cheers, and let's go ahead and have a little discussion this evening. So welcome to the channel tonight. As previously discussed, I had mentioned that one of the things that we're going to think about tonight is puppies because, you know, this is the time of year where everybody may be getting that itch, or you might have a puppy lined up for yourself already, or you're thinking about it, and you know, this is a good time to get forward thinking. You know, some of you will be picking those pups up really shortly. Some of you may be looking for your first grouse dog, or your first dog along those lines. And I'm just going to kind of give you a little bit of general overview over the way that I've generally done it over the years. And keep in mind that the way that I do it is not by any means perfect. I guess I could kind of consider myself an expert if you base it upon the fact that I've made a lot of mistakes over 25 years. So my good friend Bob Ross has always told me that the difference between the average guy and the expert is the expert's made a ton more mistakes. So by no means I don't want to call myself an expert. So take it with a grain of salt if you don't agree with something that I have here. You know, a lot of folks monetize their platforms to give you information. I'm doing it for free. I ask that you please respect that and just consider that these are my opinions and these are things that have worked for me. They're not per se the gospel of all things bird dogs. So with that being said, I will also entertain some questions as we go through this evening. So if you do have any questions, you can feel free to post them right on the comment thread. And depending on where I'm at in the chat, I'd be more than happy to answer your question. So let's keep it civil. Let's have a good discussion. So for those of you that may not have, excuse me, I got to turn this notification off on the phone because it's getting hot and heated here and it's kind of starting to drive me nuts. For those of you who may not be in line to get a puppy already, but you're kind of just kicking the tires on something and you're really, really interested in hunting birds and you want to get a dog, and particularly in the grouse woods, there's a number of things that you really should consider when you choose your breed. It really has to do with your kind of hunting type, and more or less your personality type even comes to play as well. And again, these are kind of generalizations that I make, but you know, if you're into the Flushing breed type of dog, they can move really, really fast, but a lot of them stay within gun range. You get to see a lot of the dog work. It's exciting. And you move with the dog and you do a lot of walking and kind of a lot of more control in the early stages of development with them. So if you have that type of personality, that might be a good match for you. Or if you like to see a dog hunting close, that would be a good match for you. Or you can get into the realm of the pointing dogs. And the pointing dogs, I got to tell you, aside from the fact that when you really want to go and break a pointing dog, and that's a training phrase that we use, most of what you're going to do with a pointing dog is hands off. With a good pointing dog, you're not going to see them in the grouse woods. They're going to be out searching for birds. And if you have more of a controlling personality, or you'd like to see the dog and do the work, then maybe a pointing dog isn't going to be for you within that aspect. And keep in mind that each of these types of dogs, the Flushing or the pointing dog, they all have subsets within one another that within each group that are for different types of hunters per se. Now, if you really, really want to get a pointing dog, but you want to see the dog work for you, and you don't want it being very rangy on you, then you might want to look at a subbreed of a pointing dog that might be a closer working dog, which would be something like a Bracco, Italiano, a Spinoni. Some of the breeds of setters are like that. The Ryman type, they're a little bit slower, they stay closer, and you can actually see them work and watch them point. So there are subsets in there. But as a generalization, most of the pointing dogs that you're going to get into, the pointers and the field setters, even to a certain point, the Llewellyn centers, German short hair pointers, those dogs are going to be out running and doing the search for you. And you just got to kind of bear with it and let them do their thing. So definitely not for something that if you want to control. And then even within the Flushing dogs, which I'm by no means a Flushing dog expert, other than when I went to college, I trained my friend's Australian Shepherd to hunt grouse in the Dewey Marsh just north of Stevens Point, but that's not even really a recognized hunting breed. But actually, that was probably my first grouse dog. But even within the Flushing dogs, there are different types. You can have field cockers, field English springers that have a lot of punch to them. They're very fast. You keep up with them, but you do control where they go, and you go with them and things like that. It's a more active exercise. And then you can get down to a little bit more methodical types, even within that breed. Some of the springers are a little bit slower. And then even within the Labrador retrievers, right, some of them work a little closer, work a little slow, but there are ones that are fast and they move out there. So there's just tons of ways you can go with this. And I mean, we could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. But I just want to kind of stimulate thought and get you thinking a little bit about these things. One of the things that I would definitely recommend if you're new to this game and you're looking to get into hunting with dogs, you're going to want to look at talking to someone that has these dogs of these different types. Perhaps go to a test day, trial day, or a NAVDA function or something like that, and talk to your friends, your buddies, and see if they can get you involved with hunting over their dog. If you have a particular breed in mind, you'd want to contact some of the kennels, and any of the breeders worth a shit will absolutely let you come and see their dogs work and take you out in the field so you can see their dogs in the woods and whatnot, and you'll know what you're getting into. Keep in mind that each one of these dogs within the subtypes of certain breeds are going to have certain intrinsic behaviors within the different what we would call the phenotypes of what you see, right? Some of the German dogs are traditionally bred for sharpness because they come from a certain line where they're required to do a test where they got to track down a fox or something like that. And for the most part, they can, a good breeder can have a program where that can kind of turn off and turn on. But if you're getting a generally a high-strung dog that's kind of sharp and very driven like that. You have to kind of talk with the breeder and talk with people who own them to make sure that they have an off switch on them, right? The last thing you want to do is bring something into the family that's not a good mix. And, I'd be lying if I said every, high potent trial dog is batshit crazy in the house, because that's not true. It's simply not true. But the ones that are very well bred, they do have an on and off switch, and they can be some of the most lovable creatures in the world. But again, that's up to you to do your research, to visit these different kennels once you get the idea of what breed you want, and visit with people that have those dogs, or talk to people and do a lot of research in that. A lot of other things to think about, of course, are you've probably thought about this already, but do they shed? Allergies, things like that. Depending on your household, is going to be an inside dog. I can tell you for a fact of a matter, don't buy into the bullshit that German short-haired pointers don't shed. My dogs shed like crazy, right? Those kennel dogs out there, when I'm cleaning those kennels, after it gets hot, cold, it's all I'm doing is blowing hair with the pressure washer, because, all dogs shed. You just have to consider things that you're going to work with. And for the most part, once you narrow down to the type of dog that you'd like to hunt with, and you get a very well-bred one, the dog should do a lot of the work for you, right? If you do your homework and get yourself set up with a good breeder, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be right in the wheelhouse of what you need. A lot of those well-bred dogs, they don't need training so much as they just need a little bit of guidance, right? If you guys have followed me for a while, we talk about genetics, exposure, and patience here, right? And the dog should have the genetic makeup for what it's going to do. It's your job to expose it to the proper situations so that you can guide it through its stages of development. And then you have to have patience, right? One of the things that I personally don't care for are these tests on dogs at a very, very young age. A lot of those are designed to be for natural ability, but there's a hell of a lot of training that goes on. And this is just my personal preference. I think there's a little bit too much that can be put on a dog at an early age, when you would rather have them just going through that exposure phase and letting the birds teach them and whatnot. But that's an entire discussion. So, for those who are just joining us now, the past 10 minutes or so, been just basically given a brief about trying to match a dog to your personality, whether it's a flushing dog or a pointing dog, the different types, the different subsets with each one, the things that you should think about. Are you a type A personality that has to be in control? Then, maybe a certain type of dog is good for you. If you're more laid back and you want to let the dog do all the work, then maybe a certain type of dog as well for you. And along with that goes things such as range and whatnot. But they should all, if you get a well-bred dog, if it's a flushing dog, it should flush hard. It should retrieve. If you get a well-bred pointing dog, that dog should point hard, and it should stay there on point all day long, and it should retrieve as well. The guys that are doing this for a long time, that are doing the right thing, that's the kind of dogs they're throwing out there. So I had mentioned a little bit about working with breeders and stuff, and I'd like to get into some stuff about what I think a breeder should be, the relationship that you should have with your breeder. But I'm going to pause, enjoy a little bit of my point special. And while I'm doing that, does anybody have any questions on the general overview about types of dogs matching with personalities or anything like that? Feel free. Doesn't cost you anything to type. While I'm before I move into that second section too, I gotta throw a shout out to the folks at Pheasant Fest, right? I know that's viewership's probably going to be down a little bit tonight because a lot of people are hanging out down there in Kansas City. And I do apologize for moving this to tonight, but my boys have big regional wrestling tournament on Sunday, so I wouldn't have been able to swing it. We've got to go all the way down to Indian River and back, and it's going to be a really, really long day. But to the folks at Pheasant Fest, hey, I don't know if you've seen this yet or today, if you don't subscribe to the Pike Gear emails, but Brent has got some really absolutely asinine, ridiculous discounts on his gear. He is currently, right now, I think the pants are like 50% off. And sure as shit, I had to buy another pair, so I got another one in there. But you can't beat the deal that the Pheasant Fest deals that he has going on right now. So you might want to head over to that website to Pike Gear. I don't make any money from Pike Gear, truth in advertising. Brett is a really good friend of mine. He helps a lot with the bonanza and things like that. I love him to death. I even helped coach his kid wrestling a little bit years ago. So he's got some really banger deals going on. If you ever wanted to get into some of that Pike Gear, those Pheasant Fest deals are actually legit nuts right now. They're like 50% off. I do have a question from Charlie. And the question is, so the dog's ability to hold point instinctually can be based upon bloodline or breed. The pointing ability originated in dogs over time. The pointing ability historically comes from, I like to explain it with a cat, right? If you ever seen a cat, and you see this with puppies too, right? Where they kind of sneak up on something and then they pause before they pounce on it. Well, over the course of time, what breeders have selectively done is bred the dogs that hold that point longer. So if you hear the term like, yeah, this guy's dogs that come from his kennel got a ton of point, or ones that come out of that certain sire or that dam, they got a lot of point. You know, historically, that is something that is based upon, primarily comes out of the genetics of the dog. Now, there are anomalies within that, you know. Within a litter, I generally like to say that if I have 10 puppies, one of them is going to be a world beater. 8 of them are going to be right where they should be, and one of them is going to be on the bottom end of where it should be. And that seems to be something that we see quite a bit. But yeah, so Charlie, the pointing instinct is actually a genetic instinct in the dogs that's been bred for time over time over time. You know, you think about the pointing Labrador Retriever, right? At some point in time, they found out that, okay, we got some labs that are really pausing before they flush in hard, and they kept breeding those dogs that would point and hold a little longer, and next thing you know, you have the pointing lab. So it went the same way. I hope that answers your question, Charlie. I would like to move in a little bit on what to, at least again, these would be my expectations of a breeder, and something, this is my opinion. I know some breeders out there that don't do this, that have really damn good dogs. So, you know, this isn't to slight anyone or something, but this is me personally. I really feel that a breeder should have a knowledge of their own history, particularly of the history of the dogs within their kennel, and know a little bit of history about the actual type of breed that they're breeding also. I think it's really important to remember where we come from. What are the particular things that we liked, that we advance forward, and what are some of the things that we might want to change a little bit, and that brings me into the second one, is I think as a breeder, people should be able to tell you what their breeding program objectives are, and what I mean by that is what is the objective of breeding those dogs, right? It's not just to produce more dogs. Is it to better the breed? Is it to better a certain subtypology of the breed? And in my case in particular, we would have what I would consider a subtype. The dogs that we generally breed here are smaller German Shorthairs, probably borderline on the bottom end of the breed standard in terms of size. But there are certain things that we breed for within that. And the objective of our breeding program is to, create smaller dogs that can handle the grouse woods with a ton of point. Very, very good noses on them that are biddable, that have motors on them that can hold up in the grouse woods. And with that, we look at both. That doesn't mean we abandon structure. Just because our dogs are smaller, we still look for the conformation end of those also. So, a breeder should be able to tell you those type of things of what their objectives are. And you know what? It's a perfectly legitimate thing for a breeder to say, I produce healthy, kick-ass hunting dogs, right? They know what their objective is. They're producing hunting dogs. They're not dogs that necessarily would be duels or, working for the show ring or something along those lines. They're producing hunting dogs with a particular objective in mind. Some of the trial guys that I'm friends with will tell you that I'm trying to produce the next national champion because, in my view, I believe, in my view, as what I do in my trial game, this is be the other breeder talking, the kennel guy, is that, I want to advance the English pointer to try and be a national champion because these dogs eventually put out the stock for the other trial dogs, and as they filter down, they make for good grouse hunting dogs for people. So, there's a ton of objectives that could be stated by a breeder, but the important thing is that they actually have a stated objective, right? They know where they're going with their program. I think that's important. I like to visit other kennels, and it's really cool when the people that are doing that are like, hey man, come over, right? And it doesn't mean I'm going to be a pest and come over there all the time, but if you want to call somebody and you want to check it out, and I don't know anybody in the dog business that I'd be friends with anyhow that wouldn't say, fuck yeah, I want you to come look at my dogs. When I'm kind of busy this weekend, but maybe in another week or so, why don't you stop by for about 15 minutes or so? I'd love to show you what I got, right? There's pride and ownership of that, and I think that's important to look for that too. And it's there's kind of things to weed through nowadays, right? Those personal visits really mean a lot. They really show you a lot too, right? You guys that have known me for a while, and particularly if you know me on a personal basis, the brand new Instagram kennels, and the influencers and stuff. You know what? You kind of have to weed through that. You need to talk face to face, and you need to take a look and see what's going on and talk to those folks, because anybody can sell puppies online, man. You could take pictures, put it on Facebook, right? This dog, he held point for 16 and a half minutes, 800 yards out, and I walked up and I shot a double on grouse and he retrieved it to hand. Hashtag best dog ever, right? Well, that doesn't tell me a whole lot, but that's a whole nother discussion when the beer glass gets more empty. But the personal visit definitely says something to be able to go face to face with someone. Because if you're any read of people, right, it's just like the whole email game, right? There's times where we send emails to one another for work, personal reasons, or whatever, and somebody may interpret it the wrong way. So there's nothing better than putting the face-to-face meeting together so you can get a judge of each other. And actually, most breeders are going to want to put you underneath a lamp. That is really important for them as well. I see that question, Tyler. I'll get to that in a minute. I'm I'll kind of do that in a wrap up, but that's a very good question. I think it's important for them to have knowledge of each individual dog that they have in their kennel. Of course, ones that are under their ownership, that goes without saying. And what I mean about that, to clarify, let me take a little sip here. To clarify that is if they're being honest with you, and my mentor used to always tell me this, that every dog has a hole, right? When you breed dogs, you're going to find that every dog has a hole. Now we do genetic testing nowadays to kind of identify those holes, but there's phenotypical holes, that things that you can see that show up that, you have to decide whether you're going to live with or not. And when, if somebody can tell you about each individual dog, they should have a read on that. I can go down the line on mine, right? My Panzer dog, 16 years old, retired, was a great dog. I mean, that dog would motor. That dog would literally cover 12 miles an hour. And during that 1 hour hunt, he would be sticking grouse. And he'd be finding a lot of them because he was moving out and he was doing all that kind of stuff. From the perspective of like retrieving, though, he wasn't that good of a retriever. He wouldn't retrieve it to hand. He'd kind of jump on it, give it a chomp, look at me, pick it up, and he wanted to go hunting more, right? And I never force broke the dog, but I mean, he retrieved well enough for me. About every third one, he'd decide to bring it over and drop it at my feet or something like that. And that was just something I lived with, because other than that, the dog was phenomenal. I mean, that dog's pointed over 1,000 grouse in his life, and we shot a whole hell of a lot of them. My Georgia dog, she was perfect when she decided that you weren't going to hunt with her, right? And it wasn't that she was a runoff. She was just one of those dogs, right, that we'd be cooperative and we'd be super cooperative, and that dog would point all day long. She'd point birds 150 yards out there. I'd get up to her. She'd still be with them, or she'd relocate a little bit. Had an uncanny knack to stay with those dogs or stay with those birds. But there were times where she thought there were birds over there. You were going over there. She wasn't coming to where you were at, and you weren't changing direction. You were going with her, no matter what e-collar you had or anything like that, because she was just that driven. So, all right, so I know that individual dog, right? And I can go on down the line. One of the things that popped out, and I've told people this before, when you see one of my German Shorthairs, you're going to look at their paws, and the right front paw, which I had to be careful because you're watching me now. Oh, it actually works, right? Is going to look like this. All the other feet are straight, and this right front paw is just going to be cocked just a little bit. They all pass elbow tests. They all pass every single test known to mankind. For some reason, they have that little cock out on their foot. And it showed up in 2 generations of my dogs. They've mostly lived to 15, 16 years old and never have any problems with the shoulders. So they're not show dogs. I'll live with it. And, these are just examples of things that I talk with that might talk about that might not show up on a genetic test or something like that, but a breeder should know each one of those things about their dogs. What's the whole, what can you live with on top of that? We talk a little bit about health testing, and I'm going to try and do a screen share here, so bear with me. And Tyler, I did not forget about your question. I really appreciate it, but I'm going to get to it after this. We'll kind of wrap up because I think that's a good beer drinking one to talk about how we first started out. But so each breed registry, right, or each breed club has a number of recommended tests for each type of dog. And these things can be, this is where some breeders and can get into a little bit of discussion over this, right? Now, Me at a minimum for years when I first started doing it, we all did hips because hips were, that's just the standard, right? You got to do hips. But come to find out, on top of hips, you're doing thyroid, you're doing shoulders, you're doing eyes, you're doing heart, all of that other stuff, plus the recommended tests for each breed. Now, there's an argument that can be made for some of the folks that aren't doing that within certain breeds, is that the parents or grandparents were clear, therefore any of those offspring are going to be clear. So that's something you particularly want to talk with your breeder about. But I'm going to try and do a screen share here. Hopefully I can get this working, because at one point in time I was checking it out how to be able to do that. Let's go to start this one. I thought I had it figured out before. You got to bear with me on this one. All right. I had a couple of things that I wanted to show you off of one of my dogs, and I apologize for this because I got kid reading really, really loud in the bedroom, screaming, playing that goddamn video game. It's about to piss me off. All right. Well, now I can't find the doggone thing. Or it's supposed to allow me to do a screen share. I want to actually show you one of the OFAs on my dogs. And there's actually a link that I put into the pinned, oh, here we go, screen share. All right, let's see how I can do this. If you want to go to that link that I had pinned, it will take you to my Scout dog. And on my Scout dog, what it'll do is it will take you to, so if you guys want to go to that, I'm sorry I can't share it right now. I don't know why the hell this isn't working. It's not allowing me to do that tab right there. But if you want to go to that Aspen Thicket Grouse Dogs page, and maybe you can open it up on another window. I'm sorry, I tried to get this thing going, but what we want to do with that is if you go to that page, it's going to link you directly. It's going to link you directly to the health certification page of my dog, which will actually, you can click on a link and it'll take you right to the OFA website. And from that, you can actually take a look at all the certifications on the dog, right? There's a link. It takes you to the OFA page, ofa.org. And on ofa.org, it'll show you all of the health certifications on my dog. And it actually has links that'll show you health certifications on any of the siblings, parents, grandparents, and it does everything through a whole bunch of these different, you can even like go through the pedigrees and stuff on that. And it's actually really, really cool type stuff. And it's kind of, apologize because, yeah, I did mention elbows. We do test for elbows. That's an important thing to test for on German Shorthairs. I think that was added into GSPs probably within the past 10 years or so. But yeah, so you can go to the OFA website, and really, I strongly feel that you should be doing these on all generations of dogs, unless your line breeding coefficient is so tight that you're not going to expect something to show up. But for the fact of the matter is, right when you expect something not to show up, that's when it's going to show up. Expect it when you least expect it. is always the way that works. It never, ever, ever fails that way. So I'm still kind of working through trying to do this damn screen share. I apologize, I can't do it. I do not know why it's not working. It's starting to make me mad, but what are you going to do, right? So anyhow, one of the next things that I wanted to talk about a little bit also is this the new DNA testing, and there's actually two types that breeders can do nowadays. So it's important that you kind of don't confuse those, to be honest with you. Like there's a AKC DNA, which they do to kind of prove that dog is yours or it's a certain dog for breeding purposes. And then we have the Embark DNA profiles, which I had another one that I was going to bring up. I apologize again. I don't know why I can't work that screen share, but we'll get better as we go on with this. And within that Embark DNA, they test generally for around, I think the last test I had, it's up now. It used to be like 257. Now it's 271 different types of genetic markers that they look for. And more importantly, they look for things that could be troublesome within the breed. So for each time I do one on a German Shorthair Pointer, they are going to test that dog for day blindness, cone degeneration. They're going to check for hereditary sensory automatic neuropathy. They're going to check for von Wildebrands and things along those lines, which you typically might find within a German Shorthair Pointer. And that way it's just kind of like a really safe way to know that that's not going to show up. But like I said, keep in mind, that doesn't mean every breeder is going to do that, because a lot of those things, quite honestly, if the parents or grandparents don't have them, they're going to be clear through that. Now, when you get to doing outcrosses and things like that, then you have to pay attention a little bit more. But so to get back on track, I couldn't show you the things, but I think it's important to remember that you can ask questions about health, right? Now, I would not expect many breeders to give you a health guarantee. Quite honestly, they'd be batshit nuts, in my opinion, to give you a health guarantee, just for the fact of the matter that dogs are dogs and you don't know what's going to happen. Now, there are some folks that have very good policies. And a good policy is a replacement dog based upon genetic things, right? So when you buy a dog from us, I give you a printout from Embark. It says, congratulations, here's your puppy. It's tested clear for these genetic diseases. It gives you a little bit of peace of mind, but that doesn't mean none of that shit can show up later on. And if it does show up later on, our policy is if the dog has anything that could be genetically through the parenting or anything through that breeding program, one of those things, will replace the puppy. And I think that's just a good business practice to care about that. But I'm still kind of sketchy about that, to be honest with you, because they're still dogs, right? They got 4 legs, fur, brain size of a grape, and whatever it may be. Things can happen because they're animals. So, I think these health certifications, I guess what I'm trying to say is they're important, but they're not the end of the world, right? Because there are proven breeders out there that have done this time and time again, that have a lot of dogs cleared through parenting and lineage, that maybe they really only need to worry about the hips or something like that. But we do the whole shebang here. I think that's kind of important. The DNA stuff, that's new. That's relatively new, right? And there are people that use that religiously to kind of match their dogs. We do here. Particularly, I was doing it at the time because I had dogs that I was breeding that had a 20% inbreeding coefficient, right? They're up there getting close to, 25%, 25% related to whatever they're breeding to and stuff like that. And it's important when you're doing that to know what you're matching up there, because that is the time when any of those recessives would come up. So we have a map of that, and that's a whole nother discussion. Health could go on and on and on and on, but I need to take a break here and take a little bit of drink and regather on that. In a nutshell, right? You know what you're looking for. You have to feel comfortable. Whatever makes you feel comfortable, that's what you're going to ask for. Me personally, these are the things I would look for. The other thing you may want to talk with a breeder about is what kind of games they play with their dog, right? If that's important to you, if you're going to be looking for a versatile dog that you want to be able to duck hunt with, or go shoot rabbits with, or bird hunt with, then you're probably going to want to go talk to NAVHDA folks and see people that maybe do the NAVHDA thing, right? Or if you want a really big going dog, hard driving, hard pointing type thing, then you might want to go over to the folks that run the cover dog trials or the field trials like that. Or you might get into also the some of the AKC tests. I have my own opinions on those. I'd ask you to form them, right? The higher level ones are good, but the lower level ones are quail and short grass and stuff like that. And I don't know that correlates really, really well. But so anyhow, that's another thing that when we talked about earlier, when you think about what type of dog you want, fit the style of the dog that fits you. Well, that's also part of this when you talk to the breeder and see what that breeder is doing in terms of trials, tests, or anything like that. I mean, I'll be the first one to admit I don't test my dogs at all. My dogs are purely grouse hunting dogs. That's what we do. And I don't have any of the time to go out there and do that kind of stuff. The AKTC test doesn't fit what I do, right? The cover dog stuff is a little bit bigger than what I want my dogs to run and be, so we're right in the middle of that. Plus, I also have 2 boys that wrestle all over the United States in a daytime job and this kind of shit, so don't really have time for it. But that is another way that you can check out what the breeders are doing, in particular to the type of style that you want to hunt. Again, it fits your type. And then when you get into the actual process of thinking you're going to lock in somebody with a puppy or something, I think it's really important that that breeder would allow you to come visit those pups and spend time with them after they're out of the period. I typically say, probably after 3 weeks, when you get closer to 4 weeks, then you can start having more interactions with people and stuff like that. And then, what do they do? Do those puppies that they have there, how do they handle a litter of puppies? Do those puppies just basically sit in a whelping box the entire time and maybe get to, run around in a basement or something like that? Or are they actually, when they're hitting 4 or 5 weeks old, are they actually getting outside, getting into the the woods and doing things in a group and getting a lot of that introductory work done? I think that's really important too. So those are all the things that I would kind of look for if I was looking into a kennel. Again, my own opinion, like everybody's different, but those are kind of the things that I've looked for over the years. By no means do I mean to diminish some of those tests. But, as far as ability and stuff like that, that's great that people do that. But sometimes folks just want a hunting dog too that's proven on wild birds. So with that, I'm going to circle back. I'm going to take a little break here, have another drink of this beer, and I'm going to circle back to Tyler's question. Mark brought up one about socialization. We're going to get into that, Mark, when we get into phase 3. Tyler, where is my line from and how did I settle on that line? That's a really interesting story. So I gave the whole 101 on this on the Bird Camp podcast a couple of years ago, and I've told that story, but maybe you haven't heard it. So I spent the better part of 10 years in the military. When I was a kid, my dad and I went grouse hunting all the time. Never had a dog. Weren't allowed to have a dog. Went to the military. Got out of the military after 10 years. Went to college. I wanted to grouse hunt and brook trout fish, so I moved to the UP. And the first thing that I did is like, damn it, I'm buying a dog. And I bought a dog from basically a living room in Escanaba. But Patrick McCurry is a good friend of mine. He forever changed my life with that dog. I can't thank him enough. But I struck gold with that dog, actually not knowing any of the things that I'm trying to relay people to tonight to talk about. But I didn't know squat about that dog, but come to find out, that dog is probably one of the best grouse dogs I ever owned in my entire life. His name was Gunner. His registered name was Lakeside Gunner Gone Wild before we even had a kennel. That dog was a really, really good dog. And he probably was because I didn't know enough to try and ruin him at the time and put my hands on him and stuff like that. And, the subsequent dogs I got from there, the next two were kind of ended up, I don't want to say they were shit. They were good dogs, but they could have been a lot better if I wouldn't have thought I knew everything. But anyhow, so it turns out that dog has had what turned out to be Hall of Fame bloodlines in him. So his father was a dog by the name of Baron, who I actually acquired ownership of a couple years after that. But his father was a dog from Brenda Rowe and Rick Hopkins' kennel down in North Georgia, called Walnut Hills GSP. Those people are salt of the earth. We're still friends to this day. Produce, in my opinion, the best German short-haired pointers in America. But that dog, was a direct grandson of a dog by the name of Snip Sticked Off. And the more and more research I did on that, I liked their lines. So I eventually acquired the Baron dog from Patrick, who was actually a son of Rip, or Snips Ticked Off. And then I bred him to my Gretchen dog. And then I took that pup from that Panzer. And at that point in time, of course, he was 50% out of Baron, 25% out of that Rip. And then I bought a dog from Rick and Brenda, my Georgia dog back then, and bred them together. And that's where that line essentially started. So, at that point in time, it was probably majority of Rick and Brenda's line, close to 50% through ancestry at that point in time. And then we just kind of grew from there, bringing dogs in and out and whatnot. But that's really the basis of the foundation of my line. And I'd check them out. Walnut Hills short hairs, check them out while you can. I mean, they are really, really great people, man, and they produce some damn fine bird dogs, and that's where our stuff started way back then. So what made me settle on that line? Well, first and foremost, I settled on German short-haired pointers because my grandpa had them. But my grandpa's German short-hairs were definitely different than the German short-hairs that we produce now, and those are the big bone ones, big slower ones, stuff like that. What sold me on that line is it's exactly what I like about mine right now. They're a little bit smaller. They're agile. They're fast. Rick and Brenda run those dogs in field trials, some horseback trials, not the cover dog stuff, but I mean, they run them in trials. Those dogs have a good amount of run to them. They got a ton of point, extremely smart, and they're beautiful. They started doing duels, I don't know, probably about 15 years ago or so. And one of the things that Brenda always told me is that dog should hunt its ass off and look good at the same time. And I firmly believe that. I can't thank them enough. So that's actually where my line started at. Oh, how far are we into this here? All right, I don't want to keep you guys too much longer, but I want to talk about a really important part here. What I want to talk about here is, yeah, thanks, Bill. I appreciate that. Those are great line of dogs, man. Rick and Brenda are just awesome dogs, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my good friend Mike Johnson at Black Point Kennels. He's got some really, really athletic dogs. My Gretchen dog was from there back then, and those dogs are really a trip, man. He produces some really athletic dogs. Like, if you don't get one from me or Rick or Brenda, I'd go get one from Mike in a heartbeat, man. Like, his dogs like stand next to the truck and just kind of like click their wrists, and they land like butterflies on the tailgate. And yeah, they're very, very athletic. So I want to kind of get into things you can do when you get a puppy home, right? So we're gonna shift into gears for the folks here that are like, hey man, this is all good information, but I already bought the damn dog, so what should I be doing with it now? And the most important thing that I can tell you when you bring a puppy home is, remember the old saying, right, that the doctors prescribe to, and I don't know if it's like nom non sincere, I can't remember the Latin thing for it, but it's like, first do no harm, right? And the way that you can do harm with a puppy is by trying to make it do too much and not enjoying it for what it is. It's a puppy, right? And I think especially myself, my expectations for a puppy, sometimes I have to really, really temper it, because we get that puppy home and like, man, it came from a great kennel, and God, I want to see this dog point, man. I want to see him point, and I want to get him through gunfire. I want to do all this stuff because this dog's going to be awesome. But, the really thing you need to do is take your time. So, first and foremost, when you get the puppy home, and some people might not agree with this depending on how far you got to travel, but this is always a family thing for me. And, on the Uper roads up here, when I've got dogs from somebody else, from like Mike's kennel, and Mike and I have bred back and forth over the years, I put the damn dog in my lap, or I let my wife carry it in the lap, and I let it fall asleep in their lap, because that's the only one ride you get, right? You guys have ever had kids, right? You remember when you buy a new car, like you have kids and you buy a new car and you're like, nobody's getting in this fucking car for like 4 days. I'm just driving it to work. And then on the weekend, they can get in the car because it's like it's only new for the ride home or whatever it is and stuff like that. Well, I think that's really important with puppies too. Like, you have to enjoy part of this stuff. I mean, if you're traveling across the interstate and it's super fast and everything like that, then put them in a crate. It's got to be safe. But at some point in time, when you can enjoy that ride, put them in your lap, right? Enjoy that kind of stuff. They grow way too fast, just like kids, right? So you're bringing the dog home, right? I talk about 2 sets of rules: inside rules and outside rules. And I firmly believe that dogs can make a difference, right? When they're inside the house, if you don't want them on the furniture, they don't come on the furniture. Tell them no. They're going to learn a lot of no when they're inside the house, right? You want to crate them inside the house? You crate train them. Put them in the house. In the crate. That's not going to hurt the dog, right? You want to teach the dog to sit. It's generally not going to ruin a pointing dog. You can teach it how to sit. You can teach it how to behave. You can teach it to wait. You can teach it to stand still before it's fed, all that kind of stuff. Just do it in moderation, right? And a friend of mine, Tom, made a good point once. It's okay to teach a dog to sit, but if every time somebody's walking past it, they whip out a treat and the dog sits, that could affect you later on in training. And it could. That's a very good point there. So you just want to do things a little bit in moderation when you're inside. But there should be tons of rules in the inside. There should be structure because you want a good house dog, right? But the minute you go outside, gloves are off. And this is just the way I do it, right? When they go outside, gloves are off. Like, they can go do whatever hell they want, right? I'm a potty train them. I don't want them to go to the bathroom in the house. But if I let them outside, I'm going to let them go do whatever they want within reason, right? If you live in a neighborhood, you got to watch the dog. You don't want it to run out in the street or driveway or something like that. But we live in the country. It's a little bit different here. Which, you know, I like them to go out and get that exposure. And Mark had mentioned earlier, socialization is extremely important for a puppy. But don't overthink that it has to be socialization with other dogs. Don't you dare ever take a puppy to a dog park. Disaster. Any dog that comes from a decent kennel, right? The breeder is going to keep that dog 8 to 10 weeks. They're going to know everything they need to know about dog language from the 8 to 10 week time period because the breeder kept them that long. So they know what a growl means. They know what hackles up mean. They know what ears back mean. They test it on one another. They know all of that stuff, right? Their trust in another dog is generally based upon the communication that dog gives them, and they need to learn that communication in the litter. Don't take them to a dog park, right? Don't take them to greet other dogs on a leash. That becomes a shit show too. We could have a whole conversation about this stuff, but the whole point I'm getting at here is you want to expose that dog to as much as you can during that socialization period. You want it to see white men, African men, white women, African women, Mexican women, Mexican men, everything, you know, people of different color, people of different sizes, people with glasses, people without glasses. You want to take it, see kids. I like to take mine to the gas station. And if you live in a small town, stuff like that, you walk in with a puppy in your arms, who isn't like, oh my God, let me hold that puppy, right? Or they let it run around. All of that stuff builds confidence in a puppy, or it brings the confidence out that they have within them, right? So we got them home. There's inside rules. There's outside rules. There's socialization. We're interacting them with things that are going to be important to them later on, right? So I'm blessed here, right? You guys seen the videos. I've got a bunch of training grounds here. I can take these puppies for walks in the woods. Hell, if it's not nesting season, the odds are they're probably bumping grouse and learning how to do that. But if you live in more of a built-up area, the odds are you got a park somewhere close by, right? Or you know somebody that's got a wood lot or something like that. And it doesn't have to be the grouse woods, but you want to get him to go to the point where they're going around things, over things, through things, getting to sniff things and all of that stuff to kind of expose themselves to things that they are going to eventually, you know, become accustomed to going into the grouse woods. And I let them go as far as they want to go with that. But I need to qualify that statement with the fact that that whole Garmin system, I don't think there's a dog trainer alive that won't tell you it's fundamentally changed the way that we work puppies, right? We no longer are terribly concerned that they're going to run away on us and we can't find them and things like that. It really gives us the control to know where they're at. And I mean, even when these dogs are like 14 weeks old, 16 weeks old, they're almost 4 months old, you'd throw a collar on them. You don't have to turn it on. I mean, you're not ready to do any e-collar training with them, but it kills two birds with one stone because they get used to wearing it while they're doing fun shit, and you know where the dog's at, and that allows you to kind of keep your mouth shut and let the dogs go through the woods and do all those things that they need to do to get that exposure. Me personally, I let them explore and let them go have that fun. And I don't have, like, this is pretty much like the finadra, the finish of it for me right now, because in a dog's first year, I really only want that dog to know his name and to come when he's called And other than that, I'm just going to throw a Garmin Alpha on them. I'm going to let them run around in the woods. And let me take that back, right? I'll introduce them to birds and gunfire, that part of it, but that's not an expectation, right? That's a training. Just, I want to get them introduced to birds. I want to get them introduced to gunfire. They know their name. They're come when they're called. I'm going to take them hunting, and I'm going to get them into as many birds as I can. If they point the bird and the situation's right, I'll try and shoot the bird. If they don't, they chase it. It's one more they're not going to catch, and it's going to bring out the staunchness in them on wild birds. But the important thing is that they are getting exposed to those birds, and that's how they learn to hunt for objectives. You let them have fun that first year. Depending on the dog, you might let them have fun for a year and a half, and then you come back and fine-tune stuff if you need to fine-tune it. So it all goes back to, if it's, first do no harm, right? Inside rules, outside rules, genetics, exposure, patience. Take them out, let them explore the world. Do not give in to any bullshit. If they're scared of something, you ignore it, right? And then don't rush the birds and gunfire. Don't rush the training, and you should be good to go. And that's really all I do with them. If you want to set them up for future training, there's a great book by Joan Bailey, Dr. Bailey. It was called Helping Gun Dogs Help Themselves. And I wish I could show you a copy, but I borrowed it to someone. I mentioned this last year. Somebody has that book from me, and they have not returned it yet. It's a really good book because it talks about things you can do with a puppy that prepare it for future training. Like every time you pick up the puppy and you go into your truck or your car, you say the word kennel, right? But whether you know it or not, you're teaching that dog that every time it goes into something, that kennel word means go in, go in, go in, right? It's all these conditioning things. It's a really good book, but I wouldn't go any further than that. So I guess that's kind of my spiel for the evening. I feel like I kind of went a little bit long-winded, but I guess it was only an hour. And, we do a lot of these things. A lot of our seminars that like the Banassa Bonanza and the grouse hunting seminars and stuff like that, and the puppy clinics, we get a lot more in depth than I did here. I'm not one. Jeff Parrish, good question right here. Okay, so this is going to go back, right? Jeff tuned in a little late. When you start hunting that pump, is it on the ground by itself or a brace mate? I don't ever hunt them with a brace mate. Now, primarily because I use pointing dogs, I want that dog to go out and find its own birds, because then that dog is learning. Every bird that dog encounters on his own, he's going to memorize what the habitat was, what the location was, and everything. And then that creates the pointing dog that be able to go out and search for objectives. And those objectives may be that certain type of habitat type. And this is a real generalization, but this actually happened. My Gretchen dog, I want to say she was probably about 4 months old. I was taking her for one of those springtime walks. And the woodcock are coming back. It's before nesting season. And she bumps a woodcock underneath the pine tree. And we were literally 50 yards from the truck, and it took 45 minutes to get out of the woods because she ran to every single pine tree and false pointed, expecting there to be a woodcock there. So that's a really good example of what I'm speaking to here, right? If you hunt that dog by itself, it's going to go out and find birds. And it doesn't mean it's going to go to every pine tree. That was a puppy type thing. But in general, right, if you take a dog out and you're hunting along an edge and there's certain things along that edge, or even if you're hunting in the cover but it's finding birds at the edge, that dog is, from that point forward, it's going to learn how to hunt that edge. And I found that when you run dogs together, unless the dog is really independent, going out on its own Typically, the young dog likes to follow the older dog. I don't believe that it's picking up that same self-knowledge that it would be if it was hunting on his own. And again, that's my opinion. I know there's a lot of old timers that used to say, take Sparky out there with Rex, and Rex is going to teach Sparky everything, or he's going to learn from Sparky. So, I mean, I guess that could go both ways, but my opinion on it is I like to hunt them by themselves. Hopefully that answered that for you, Jeff. Okay, so where I was kind of going with this, in wrapping it up, so we talked tonight about, again, just a generalization of if you're looking for a dog, these are the things you might want to consider. Building a relationship with the breeder, and again, from the point of view of things that I like, that doesn't mean that it has to ultimately be that way. We certainly talked about health certifications and how those can go either way and what your level of comfort is. And then we talked very briefly about what to do when you get a puppy home. And the reason we talk so briefly about it is because you shouldn't do a lot of shit with a puppy, right? You need to enjoy a puppy, spoil the hell out of them, have rules on the inside, no rules outside, expose them to a bunch of stuff, socialize them, get them into the kind of stuff you want to hunt, get them through birds and gunfire, and then take them hunting as a young dog. And that's really where we go with that. But again, tonight I talked for an hour on 3 subjects. We do more in-depth stuff at a lot of our clinics, the Bonanza and whatnot and things like that. And again, I mean, everything, for those who come in late, I had a little disclaimer at the beginning. These are my thoughts and opinions, right? I'm not per se the only expert on this. This is just stuff that has worked for me. I know there's more than one way to proverbially skin a cat. But I also know that there's a lot of people out there that probably could use this type of information, and so I'm kind of throwing myself out here with this. I'm not monetizing it or anything, so it's done on open source. If people want to cut me apart, they can, but I just ask to be kind and understand that these are my opinions and my experience on that. So other than that, I don't have a whole lot else, but I got a little bit of beer left here, so if there's any other questions anybody has, I apologize why I couldn't share that screen. Actually, I'm going to take a sip of beer and try and see if I can do that now, because I really wanted to show you guys those health profiles so I could kind of give you an idea of what those things look like, right? So when you're looking at them, Wi-Fi. Yeah, for some reason I'm up here with the it's interesting night here, right? Okay, I'm sorry. It's telling me probably they're sucking up all the bandwidth with their goddamn video games, so it is what it is. That's the way it happens. All right, I don't know if we have any other questions. I'm sorry that we had the delay in that, but I hope you guys enjoyed this. If anybody has any ideas on anything that you would like to hear in the future when we get together for stuff like this, I'd be more than happy to oblige you guys with that. So you can go ahead and continue to comment on this thread later on after I turn the video off, or we can you can also message me or something like that. Don't forget to visit some of my friends, right? Pheasant Fest, Pike Gear, it's like 50% off on those pants right now. Dude, you can get a pair of Tongass or Dakota pants for $100. Jeff from Field Armor's got some good stuff going on. Also, I want you to listen to Bird Camp, because Joe Swanky is going to have me on the Bird Camp podcast here. We're recording tomorrow evening. And don't forget that Garmin Alpha if you want to get one. go talk to the folks at Collar Clinic, right? They're good people. All right? That's all I got for now. Thanks for tuning in. Let's look forward to the spring where we can hear this kind of